An investigation into the November death of an inmate at the Mike Durfee prison in Springfield has now resulted in charges against 11 people. In this First Alert follow-up tonight, our Beth Warden brings us more on these charges announced just today and who is involved.
Of the 11 charged, some were on the outside, others were inmates, and another was a food service worker. All are facing a long list of drug charges, which is tied to the death of inmate Timothy Tyree last November.
From private citizens to the food service contract worker. Then it was distributed from there, specifically from the kitchen area to the barracks.
Two of those charged had been detained by ICE and housed at the Springfield prison from Ethiopia and South Sudan. The investigation resulted in the discovery of 61 pieces of K2, gang activity, and a relationship traced through virtual payment apps and DNA samples.
Between one of the inmates and one of the private citizens under charges.
Those who have loved ones on the inside are frustrated.
We're all still being punished.
A previous administrator accused visiting family of bringing drugs in and put up the glass partitions.
Announced that it's not just family, it's their own staff, their kitchen help.
Now that more cases of staff being involved in the drug flow are announced, she wonders when the glass will come down in all areas.
If you go with your brother and sister to see your brother and you're having to share one telephone.
The Department of Corrections says some in-person and contact visits have been allowed. I asked when the new body scanners on order will arrive, allowing more in-person visits. There was no response. Jackley believes a spirit of collaboration can keep the drugs out of state prisons.
It's going to take continued work of law enforcement in cooperation with DOC to stop the drugs coming in and hold those accountable.
Jackley also added that Senate Bill 42 addressing drugs in prisons could be a deterrent in the future. In Sioux Falls, Beth Warden, Dakota News Now.